one place. It's only recorded in Luke, but I think it's one of the most fantastic post-resurrection appearances of Jesus when he was still on the earth. And I have this in the Dining with Jesus because of the last part, where he's eating with the disciples, and that's when the lights go on, the aha moment. It's a little bit different. But I think Jesus, in the long part here, in that interaction with the two that are from Emmaus, he's telling us and teaching us how to deal with disappointment in life. I don't know about you, but I've dealt with my share of disappointment. Any of you never been disappointed in life? It starts younger than Ava's age. It does. And hopefully your life, you sit there, you hopefully have more good things that happen than disappointments, but part of life is disappointment, and I think these two men from Emmaus that were going were dealing with that. They definitely were. They're walking and talking along the way as Jesus joins them. And I think in their heart, their big question that they were asking is this one right here. Where's God in the middle of this? Where's God? And Jesus is who? And he joins them in the middle of this. Do they recognize him? Now, they're prevented from that. It's not just their slowness of heart. There are other places after his resurrection that Jesus was not recognized as well. Peter and the disciples, when they were fishing, didn't recognize Jesus on the shore until the fish incident. And they didn't do that. So it's not that unusual. But Jesus joins this group of two men on the road, and he starts asking them some questions. And that's interesting, but I'm going to tell you something. If you want to know where somebody is spiritually, and you want to help them get to the next place spiritually, the last thing you need to do is start telling them. There's a place for that. But I think the best place to start is exactly where Jesus started. He's the master. And he knows what's going on. He's God. And rather than coming up and starting out by going, you foolish men, don't you? He starts by asking questions. What's going on? Why are you so downcast? What are you talking about? They're like, are you the only person in the world that doesn't know this? And he starts, because when you ask those questions, one, it lets people know you care. And the second thing, it lets them process, right? They're processing what's going on in them as well. And so he asks that question, and you get to see their disappointment in God right here, where they talk about Jesus being crucified, and in that verse 21, but we had hoped. But we had hoped he was the answer. We had hoped that. But that was crushed. When our rulers do that, you see it again. What's more, it's the third day since that happened. There was a teaching in Jewish culture that after 4 days, no hope. And they're sitting there going, it's the 9th hour. Doesn't look like there's any hope. There were some women who went to the tomb and it was empty, but and honestly, you get the feeling they're going, but they were women. Like, showed you later, didn't it? And they get that feeling and they're despondent. They were disappointed. Because they put their hope, their expectation and redemption in this prophet, they call him Jesus, and things didn't turn out the way they'd hoped. Friends, if you haven't been there, you haven't been walking with Jesus a long time. I'm going to share 2 instances with you just personally with me. Many of you know I've been through a divorce. And I know why God hates divorce, because it's the most painful thing that you can go through, I think, maybe a death. And I heard it described as divorce is like death, but the other person won't die. That may not be a kind way of saying it, but it's the other person's always there to remind you of that failure and that emptiness. And so those kind of things are there. And when I was going through that, I had been a pastor beforehand. We'd been married 16 years. I literally had prayed, God, help me be like Jesus and give myself up for my wife. And then I pray God change me. I pray God change her. I pray God take her. I prayed God take me. I prayed everything I could think of praying. And at the end of this, when it finally separated, we had separated, I can remember I was working with Merck at that time. I'm driving down the road and I hit my steering wheel. And I cussed. And I said, God, 16 years I prayed for this. You want godly marriages. I wanted a godly marriage. Why? And I was just, people on the belt line in Raleigh had to think I was nuts. But I was in my cubicle, so it was okay in my car. And I've never heard God audibly, but it was like he was sitting next to me, and I knew God had spoken, and he said, I don't owe you an explanation. Follow me. And to this day, I'm not being funny, the hair sort of stands up on my head when I say that. I go, it was one of those things where it's like, yes, sir. And you start driving again like this, and I have no clue. All the stuff in it. Why 16 years of disappointment affected me, affected my kids, affected her, all that kind of stuff. There's deep disappointment there. That was there with God and with me and my feelings. Another time where I had some deep disappointment, Rachel's not in here, she'd go amen when I say this one, is I was in outside of Fort Mill, South Carolina. We lived in Rock Hill. We were at a church in TK, which any of you ever hear of Jim Baker? That was where his ministry was, all right? It was up in that area. And so we were in a church that was a failed church plant. They had a building, everything was there, they just didn't have people. And so we went up with these ideas to try to restart this church and get it going. And one of the things I did is I went to a church planting conference. I didn't want to plant a church. I wanted to learn some things about how to get this church up and going. And so I'm sitting in worship one of the days like we did here, and I had this overwhelming impression from God, and it was a call. And it was, I want you to plant a church. And I'm laughing because we hadn't been talking about it yet. It was worship time, you know. And I can remember laughing this morning going, kept worshiping and singing, and it was, I want you to plant a church. And I remember chuckling going, God, you missed. There are 500 people here that want to do that. And I don't want to do that. And so, I can remember telling God, I'll follow you through fire if you take care of my family. And so, went back. Rachel and I were married at that time, and I go, plant a church, replant a church. It's the same thing. That was in late January. That church closed in August. And I was without a job from August of that year until December of the following year. And that was when, by the way, the economic downturn happened, and you couldn't find jobs. And the only jobs I was offered was financial advisor, because nobody was investing money. And you're building a business, and I remember praying, God, can I take this? Is this where you're leading? He goes like, the only thing I could even get from God was, you can take it and it's not sin, but is that what I called you to? And I'm like, what kind of answer is this, God, And so we hang in there, and I can remember telling the director, we're part of a small denomination called the Associate Reformed Presbyterian Church. Historic, biblical, conservative, they believe the Bible's true, whatever, that's the denominational tag that we wear. I remember the director of church planting for this little denomination, and I were talking about church planting, and I pointed at him and said, I will never plant a church in the ARP. Oops. 14 months later, I'm in Florida, and we're starting this process. And I have to sit and go, okay, that's one of those where I got a little clue of the answer. I went through this whole thing, I could not even pray to God. I was that mad. And this is bad on me. I'm supposed to know better and be a big man and know better. But after we closed that church and everything just went boom, I didn't pray for about 3 months. And I remember Rachel at one point going, Steve, I'm worried about you. I said, Rachel, there's no need to worry. Follow God, go to hell. I have no choice. I think that concerned her a little bit. And it took me until December, from August to December, to work through some issues. And God brought me back. To that time where I said, I will walk with you through fire if you take from my family. And I was coming out of the healing process, and he goes, how dare you put conditions on people? They're my family. And I'll take them if I take them, and I'll keep them if I keep them, but you follow me. It's like, good grief, God, lighten up. But I knew the purpose. You know, there was disappointment with God. But that one I could see. I didn't do what he told me to do. I was disappointed. Why? Because I was disobedient. The divorce one, I'm sure some of that was tied in, but some of these things you don't know. And you walk through darkness. You've got those times in your life, don't you? When you feel like you're walking through the darkness and you're going, God, where are you right now? I'm calling out. I need you. Where are you? I had hoped that you were the one that was going to answer this and to do this, and I feel like I'm standing by myself and I'm hanging on by a thread, and I'm going, everybody's going, where's your God? And I'm going, oh, I have faith, and inside I'm going, I don't have a clue where he is. That's where these two from Emmaus were. And that's when Jesus comes up and he starts moving from where is God to he explains. Because these guys missed it. He goes, you guys are foolish. You're slow in heart. That means you don't get it. You've grown up in the synagogue. You've heard the scriptures from the time you were this tall. You haven't gotten that the Messiah had to die? You didn't have a Messiah if he didn't die. You're sitting there going, this is a prophet, he's going to be the Redeemer of Israel, he's going to set up the kingdom, things are going to be just the way we think they ought to be. Israel will be on the top again like when Solomon and David were there, and the other nations will bring tribute to us. That's redemption. He goes, you're missing the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem isn't your politics. The heart of the problem is your heart. And until your sin was dealt with, you don't have redemption. You can be on the top of the world physically and politically and monetarily and be dead inside. And that's the heart of the issue. So Jesus walking with them opens up and it says, beginning with Moses, he explained all the scriptures to them. And I just want you to have the confidence to know that all the scriptures talk about Jesus. It's not just the New Testament. I get concerned when there are preachers that go, we have to unhitch the Old Testament from the New Testament. I'm going, that's unbiblical. Because the Old Testament and the New Testament go like this. You don't really understand the New Testament unless you understand the Old. You can't understand the Old Testament unless you have the New. They go like this together. Because all that speaks about Jesus, as a matter of fact, he started in Moses, Genesis 3:15, right after Adam and Eve sinned. Right after they sinned, God confronts them in the garden. Adam tries to blame Eve. Eve tries to blame the serpent. The serpent's the only one that has integrity, Satan, and doesn't try to blame anybody because he knows he's behind it. And God pronounces his curses. And I can't say Satan has integrity. He just knew he was found out. He didn't have a leg to stand on. He doesn't have integrity at all. And when he gets to the serpent, he goes, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you'll strike his heel. That's pointing forward to Jesus. That's called, in theological terms, the proto-euangelion, which means the first gospel. Promise. This is it right here. Satan struck the heel of the seed of the woman by killing Christ. But through the death of Jesus, the head of Satan was crushed. His power over you was crushed if you have faith in Jesus. The promise is there. Satan should have known this thousands of years before. And he's that stupid. Smarter than us at times, but he's that foolish. And God gave that promise, and this entails the death of Jesus, the striking the heel. We see it again in Psalm 22. Jesus quotes this from the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer by night. But I'm a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone. Was he? Despised by the people? All who see me mock me, they hurl insults, and they did this. He trusts the Lord, let the Lord rescue him. They quoted that when he's on the cross. They're fulfilling Scripture and don't even know it about his death. The Psalms speak of the writings, the prophets do. Read through Isaiah 53. It reads like the rejection and crucifixion of Jesus. And I just pulled out a little part here. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by, hold on, who? God was punishing, why? It says right here. For our transgressions. For our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. By the way, many of you know that Jesus, the night before he was crucified, where he was arrested, he went to the Garden of, what? Gethsemane. You know what Gethsemane was? The crushing place. Literally, that's where the olives were crushed. He went to the crushing place and poured out his soul before God. That's exactly what he did. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds were healed. Didn't I read like the crucifixion? And Jesus opens these things. We don't know exactly which scriptures. We know all the scriptures beginning in Moses, and he opens them up and he starts talking about himself. You know how many Old Testament prophecies were fulfilled by Jesus? You know that, I'd be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of them, right? You go, a lot. It's over 300. Over 300. There's a guy named Peter Stoner who wrote this book called Science Speaks. And he was a math guy. And he said the odds of one man fulfilling all of those 300 prophecies was 1 times 10 to the 17th power. I don't even know what tillion that is. But he's illustrated, he said, let's say you get a bunch of silver dollars and you fill the state of Texas with them, border to border, 2 feet high, silver dollars. And then you blindfold a man, or a woman, or a child, and you set them loose in Texas, and there's one of those silver dollars that's marked. The odds of him going straight to that and pulling it up are the same odds that Jesus had, one man fulfilling all 300 of those prophecies. Only God could engineer that. And that's when Jesus started explaining what he did, as he pointed to that. He pointed to that. And the men started to understand maybe the Messiah had to die. Something was burning inside them. That's what they say, right? Something was burning inside them. And they knew it. They still didn't see it was Jesus. They still didn't have all the answers, did they? They were still somewhat disappointed, no doubt. But light was beginning to be shed on it because they heard from what? The Bible. The Bible. God unveils his word where? In the Bible. His plan in the Bible. Where is it that you have your faith in God according to the word he's spoken where? In the Bible. In the Bible. And this is what the men are starting to understand. And so then they arrive to the town that they were going to, and Jesus makes like he's going to go on. And we see that the next thing that comes in is you need the whole firm. You need the whole firm. Because I'm going to tell you something. Well, it says here. As they approached the village which they were going, Jesus continued as if he was going further, but they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it's nearly the day is almost over. So he went in to stay with them. Let me ask you a question. Would he, if they hadn't said anything, what would Jesus have done? He'd have kept going. He'd have gone on. I mean, truthfully. Something had happened in these guys, and they knew that this man had some answers, and they didn't understand everything, but they wanted to hear more. So they, literally, it's like they strongly urged him. It wasn't just, it's almost like holding on to the garment and saying, hold on a second, come on in with us, come on in with us. So he does that. It's this strong urging that we see there. One other place in Scripture comes to mind where I see this kind of thing. It's Jacob. The night when he's going back over to meet Esau, and he's a gamer. Jacob is a usurper. It means a man that's, any of you ever know somebody that's a player? He was a player. Now he had a tenderness to God, and he had a relationship, and he kept trying to manipulate things himself. He always did. And so here he is. He knows he's going back to, he's no longer walking with Laban. He's going back to his home now, and they're getting ready to cross the river. And the last he saw Esau wanted to do what to him? Kill him. That was why he ran away, because that plan was there. And so now he's coming back over. So what he does, this is a player. What he does is he sends over first Leah with cattle and all that, because that wasn't the wife he really loved. Then he sends over the next one, and now he's staying over last. So maybe they'll wipe everybody else out, but he's okay. That night it says in Genesis 32 it says he was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. And when the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it's daybreak." And Jacob replied, "What? I will not let you go unless you bless me." Wrestle. Some of them say it's with an angel of the Lord. Some of them say it's a pre-incarnate Christ with God himself. The thing I do know with that is Jacob wouldn't let go. He knew he didn't have it in himself, and what did he do? He's holding on. And he's not letting go, no matter what, until he's blessed. Which means he knows this is one greater than him. That's why I think it's more tied to God than anything. He's not letting go. God touches his hip, and it's dislocated or wrenched it, and he walked with a limp the rest of his life. And friends, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ and you hold on for this life and all it's worth, I'm going to guarantee you one thing. You're going to walk with a limp. I can say that with my knee. But you're going to walk with a limp, because there's going to be some place where you've been touched and it's painful and it leaves a scar. But you know what that limp does is it reminded, I can guarantee you, every time he took a step, who touched him? God. And he may not understand it. Why did he do this? But I know. You know, the problem is we're too quick to let go. You want to know why maybe we don't get the full picture, we don't get to where we know we ought to be, we don't get this, it's because we let go too quickly. We let go when there's pain, or when we don't understand, and we sit back and we settle, and we don't put too much on God because we don't want to be disappointed by him again. We haven't understood something, we've been disappointed by him, and rather than do that again, we don't pray big, we don't act big, we settle where we are. And the Church of Jesus, rather than being an overwhelming, overpowering force in this world against which the gates of hell cannot stand, ends up becoming a timid group of people that are too scared to ask big things of God. They're fine to come together and to sing to him and celebrate what can be, but they don't realize it in their own lives. And I want to tell you, God is an amazing God. And when you hold on to Him and you don't let go, at times you may be holding on most of your life and not seeing it, but it's never not worth it. It is always worth holding on to Him, because in your life, the one thing that happens when you come to Christ, other than being made new, your whole mind, your whole being is changed. And you know that you belong to Him. So why in the world am I going to say I belong to God and let go of Him? I want to say that I belong to God and I'm going to hold on no matter what. Period. Now I want to tell you something, recap a story. I came down to Florida to plant a church because God called me to, because he sort of kicked my butt when I didn't. That's what He did. He shut the door. He left me to my devices, which is what God does. That's one way He judges. And I had to come to see the emptiness in me and where I was disobedient before I came down and plant. I want to let you know it hadn't gone the way I thought. I don't have a TV ministry. I haven't written books. You know, all those things that you may think you want to do. I work full time. And I laugh about it because I'm selling drugs and preaching Sundays. I mean, you know, it's just where it is. And the thing can be, you can get disappointed with God. And every once in a while, I sit there and I go, you know, there's a church open in Frostproof, Florida. They were good to us. And there's a church open, they like me. I mean, y'all do too. I mean, that's not, they have a house that's on the lake. That's part of their package. And I could go pastor these 40 people and preach them sermons and do nothing else and get paid. And I'm 60. I could just sort of, and I think back, and I go, but that wasn't God's call. But God, you don't understand, I'm tired of working and pastoring. I go, no way, I'd rather do this any day of the week than I would sit on a lake with a church of 40 people that want to hear nice sermons. Because this is where God has said to be, and I'm holding on. And I'm just going to ask, in your life, where do you need to be holding on? God's faithful. Completely. You don't understand it, you want. But where is it in your life that right now you've got to be like these men from Emmaus and go, God, you know, I don't understand all this stuff, but stay. Or be like Jacob and go, God, I'm not letting go, period, until you bless me. And then there's a part of this, and I'm just going to go real quick, the now what. They got up, well, forget this. Everybody makes a big deal in this passage that Jesus was recognized in the breaking of bread. And I'm just going to recap it real quick for the curious. I don't think it's because it was the Lord's Supper, because these two disciples weren't at the Lord's Supper. That was only the 12, 11 now alive. I don't know what it was, but I have a feeling, if I had to go, somebody really pushed on that, what was it? It's when Jesus took bread and He gave thanks and He broke it. What's exposed? What did Thomas see? I think
the holes in His wrist.
Right. I think that's when things clicked. Because they hung in there with Him. And He revealed Himself to them at the appropriate time. And with your faith, a lot of times what is needed is hanging in there with Him until